In this video I'm going to share my semi-long-term review of the Ricoh GR3x camera. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And in this video I'm going to share my long-term review of the Ricoh GR3x camera. I've been now using this camera for about a month and a half, since the beginning of January 2022 this year. And now I feel I have enough user experience to share that with you guys. And even before I got this camera, I knew pretty much what it's going to be like because I've been using this regular GR3 for a long time now, and these two cameras are virtually identical except for the lens. This X model, which is the newer of the two cameras, has a 40mm equivalent lens with a maximum aperture f2.8, and this previous GR has a 28mm equivalent lens. And I really like that Ricoh decided to keep these cameras very discreet and without any extra model markings on them. The only downside is that if you own both cameras, it's really difficult to tell which is which. The only way to see that is to look at the numbers on the lens or the sticker at the bottom of the camera. But other than that, you can't really say which is which. And maybe if you own both cameras, you may want to mark them somehow so it's easy to tell which is which. Maybe put a sticker or some sort of mark on the hot shoe cover or something. Then it's easier to tell which to pick when you go out and start shooting. I think one of the reasons why this camera is so great is that it's a compromised design. It's a niche camera and it doesn't even try to please everyone like most cameras. But for those of us who like this type of design, it's almost like a perfect camera. This is obviously, as you can see, a tiny camera. This weighs only about 260 grams with the battery. But there is a relatively big 24 megapixel APS-C sensor inside. So it's a tiny camera with big image quality. And this also handles really well, even with gloves. When you shoot on this camera, you only need the power switch and the shutter button, and that's all you need. You very seldom need to touch any other controls or menus or anything. I shoot mostly on P mode, but if I need a specific shutter speed, I turn on the shutter priority mode. And my ISO is on auto all the time. The only real downside when it comes to the handling is the lack of viewfinder. You can buy an optical viewfinder as an accessory to put on the hot shoe, but there is no electronic viewfinder, not even as an option. And even though I really do like viewfinders, if my camera has one, I still haven't found the lack of that any kind of a big problem with this camera so far. The battery life is short, but even that has not been a major problem for me, because most of the time I keep this camera in my hand or in my pocket, and when I see a photo moment developing in front of me, I turn on the camera and the power-up time is really short. I take my picture or two, then I turn off the camera and put it back in my pocket. However, if I was traveling with this camera, I would probably have an extra battery on me, or at least a USB power bank, and when I would go into a cafe or something similar, restaurant, to have a lunch or whatever, I could then use the USB-C connector on the camera and charge the battery from the USB power bank. I already said this is a compromised camera, and one of the compromised areas is the video. You can shoot 1080p up to 60 frames per second on this camera, but I still wouldn't use this as a video camera because it's just not very good video camera. But you certainly can shoot a video clip on this if you really need to. One of the highlights on this camera definitely is the lens. It's super sharp, and the image quality is awesome in every situation. And I guess one of the reasons is the fixed lens sensor combination. That makes it easier for the designer to optimize the lens and the sensor as a pair, because you only need to optimize the micro lenses and the angle of light and everything for one lens. Of course, I can't be sure how much optimization Ricoh did with this camera and lens, but certainly the results are really excellent. And there's even a stabilizer on this camera. Ricoh calls it sensor shift, but it's basically IBIS. And then there's a built-in ND filter, which you can engage manually or have the camera automatically engage it whenever it's needed. And it's needed because the leaf shutter can't use all shutter speeds at all apertures. So the ND filter helps to keep the lens at optimum aperture in every situation. And on P mode, this camera really doesn't want to go higher than f5.6 unless you force it. And I guess that's designed because of the dreaded diffraction that softens the picture. And there's already plenty of depth of field at f5.6. But of course you can use the program shift or aperture priority mode if you really need to go higher than f5.6 for whatever reason. For those users who occasionally would like a little bit longer focal length, there is a tele conversion lens or adapter, whatever it's called, and that will transform the lens to a 75mm angle of view. The autofocus has been working really well in all my shooting situations. I have read some comments on the poor low light performance, but so far I haven't experienced that. The face recognition also works really well if you have people in the picture or you want to take a portrait or something. And one great feature for street photography is the snap focus distance, which is basically a fixed focus distance that you can preset in the menu. And that makes the camera operation even faster because the camera doesn't focus at all because it's a fixed focus distance. I have set my snap focus to 5 meters, but there are other distances to choose from. I really like the pictures I get from this camera or this camera, both GRs. And I think one major reason is that this is such a tiny camera and it's a very modest, discreet looking camera. It looks almost like a toy camera. So it's very easy to pull out almost anywhere and snap the picture and then put the camera away. And still the results are like from any bigger proper camera. And I also like the way this camera's exposure works. When I first started using these Ricoh cameras, the digital GR cameras a long time ago, I first thought the camera likes to underexpose a little bit. But now that I've used to the way the camera works, I think it only tries to protect the highlights, and it does that very nicely. And those RAW files, I always shoot RAW, those RAW files have a lot of flexibility and a lot of room to work with or work in. Is that the correct way to say it? Anyway, those RAW files are really great, and I really do like the image quality in general. I think I already said the image quality is great in my opinion. I think this Ricoh GR3x or the regular GR, these are the ultimate compact, lightweight street or travel cameras. And if you're asking which is my favorite, I can't answer because I prefer both equally. And most of the time, because the cameras are so small, I have both of these with me. And that has one definite upside compared to only one camera. See if either camera somehow refuses to work, maybe the battery dies or whatever, hopefully nothing serious, I still have a backup camera. I probably sound like a fanboy already, and maybe I am a fanboy. I really like these GR cameras. However, I fully understand that this camera is not for everyone. You have to be willing to accept the fixed lens, no proper viewfinder, and the relatively short battery life, just to mention some things that are probably downsides for many. However, if you are looking for a tiny camera with great image quality and many great features, I think this is definitely the camera for you, or than the regular GR if you prefer a little bit wider angle of view on the lens. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.